Feilu Novel Network A.Level Contracted Novel. The great gourmet of eating halberds, Tang Yi travels through the spirit of the halberd with the Great Gourmet System, and any dish tasted by his divine tongue will be replicated. Holding S.grade kitchen utensils, he will bring a storm of delicious food to Far Moon Academy. Tang, yesterday the World Food Festival sent an invitation letter. They want to eat the dishes you made. Let them wait, beautiful women first. Feilu Novel Network reminds you that this novel and its characters are purely fictional. If there are any similarities, they are purely coincidental and should not be imitated. 001 Great Gourmet. You are listening at novelfull.audio. System loading. Synchronization rate of 100.0000%. Loading completed. Implanting language system. Language synchronization completed. Organizing the recipe. The recipe has been completed. The system is officially launched. Dear host, the great foodie E will serve you. The sound that rang out in my mind first became mechanical and neutral, and then turned into a girl's voice. Tang Yi saw a strange and colorful world, and he felt like everything was just a dream. Floating around me, shining golden recipes and timeless delicacies, everything here is the highest thing that chefs dream of. Host, host. The girl's voice that rang out again made Tang Yi come to his senses. He then realized that there was a little girl with small wings in front of him, like a fairy. No, she's just a fairy. Non-human with long wings. What are you? I am the art of the Great Gourmet, and also the core of the Great Gourmet System. This system will cultivate the host into the world's top chefs and culinary gods. Kitchen God. Please select two of the following 4 rewards from the host. Once selected, it cannot be changed. This system provides free teaching and training of cooking skills, but if you want any recipe, ingredients, kitchen utensils, or cooking skills, you need to exchange corresponding food points. Before Tang Yi could understand, 4 things had already appeared before his eyes. The first one, floating on the left side, is a sharp knife, about 21 centimeters long, with a slender body and a slightly cold edge. This is the Chef King's blade. The S.grade kitchen utensils used by the previous generation of Chef Kings are invincible, not stained with blood, and can easily cleave a strong cow. For chefs, knives are like their own wives, very worthy of cherishing. Yi was explaining on the side, and Tang Yi was full of criticism. Although his words were correct, it was a bit subtle to compare them to his wife. With a turn of his gaze, Tang Yi turned to the second item. It's a shiny golden tongue floating out of thin air, slightly strange. This is the tongue of the gods, and art also has the tongue of the gods, but this is different from the ability of art to taste delicious food. If the host chooses it, once you taste a dish, you can analyze the composition of ingredients and cooking methods in a very short time. Here, art highly recommends this. It is just as powerful as Kakashi's copy of The Blood Will I. Do you also know about Kakashi? Of course, besides eating, great foodies still occasionally read comics. Tang Yi couldn't help but laugh and cry, but it has to be said that this divine tongue is indeed a super powerful ability. Among the things he is familiar with, there are similar ones such as the blood wheel eye and the carbon eye. Immediately after, Tang Yi looked at the third thing. That is a hazy light cluster, ice blue. Looking at it, one can feel a cold breath. This is the power of ice, an S.level culinary skill. If you want to make some ice dishes, cold dishes, or platters, this ability is highly recommended. If used in the summer, it would be even better. The power of ice. To put it simply, it may be adding a cooling power during the cooking process that elevates the quality of the dish to the next level. Seeing this extraordinary ability, Tang Yi quickly turned to the fourth thing. It is also a hazy cluster of light, orange-yellow in color, and one can feel a rushing heat wave. This is the flame power, also an S.level cooking skill. If used together with the ice power above, you can create the legendary Ice Fire 9 heavenly cuisine. If you want to choose the ice power and flame power together. After speaking, Yi blinked her eyes and looked at Tang Yi with great interest. Alright, that's all. Host, it's time to let me know your choice. Without any hesitation, Tang Yi announced his decision. I want the Kitchen King's blade and the God's tongue. Yi thought you would definitely choose the power of ice and fire. Can you tell Yi why you chose these two? The little fairy said curiously. If your introduction is consistent with the actual situation, then for me, kitchen utensils and divine tongues are more helpful at the current stage. And, didn't you say so? Cooking skills can be exchanged, which means I have plenty of opportunities to acquire these two abilities in the future. So that's the case, truly the host, and the consideration was very thoughtful. So, let me confirm once again, do you want to choose the Kitchen King's blade and the divine tongue? Confirm. Tang Yi nodded solemnly. The next moment, the floating Kitchen King's blade put on a black leather case and crawled into his inner pocket, quietly hanging there. At the same time, the divine tongue of shining gold also turned into a speck of starlight at this moment, pouring into Tang Yi's mouth. Your selection is over, host. Next, we will start teleportation. Target. Spring medicine. Ah no, the spirit of eating halberds, Qingfeng building of the Chinese restaurant. Your identity is as a kitchen assistant. Before Tang Yi could give a detailed question, the colorful world around him began to disappear, the flashy recipe was crumbling, and a brand new world was slowly being built. My head hurts so much. Tang Yi felt like he had experienced a major earthquake, with a severe headache. When restoring vision, one can see a room like a food storage room, with many smoked meats hanging on several shelves. Do you dream? Tang Yi quickly opened his inner pocket, and the Kitchen King's blade in his dream lay quietly there. It's true, that divine tongue. Tang Yi patted his mouth again and was surprised to find that his taste buds had almost undergone a revolution, increasing by countless times. It's all true. Tang Yi can't help but feel his heart beating faster. The gourmet system is real. Isn't it impossible for him to become the kitchen god? Tang Yi, 16 years old, male, height 175 centimeters, weight 59 kilograms. He has a handsome appearance and is also quite popular at school. But Tang Yi knew that this popularity was all because his father was a national-level chef, not because of his superb culinary skills. In fact, it is different from the ideal situation. Tang Yi's father never taught him how to cook. Apart from letting him practice swordsmanship every day, he only allowed him to observe and understand on his own. Tang Yi has a great talent, and after watching for a long time, he naturally knows a lot. However, it is precisely because of his high talent that he realizes how superb his father's cooking skills are. It is a hopeless distance, and there is no possibility of surpassing him. But now it's different. With the big gourmet system, surpassing is not impossible. No, not just his father, Tang Yi's ambition is expanding. He wants to surpass everything and become the culinary god. 002 Terrifying God's Tongue. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Becoming a culinary god. Tang Yi muttered about this unattainable goal, his heart burning with passion. Tang Yi, what are you doing, kid? I asked you to take something and get it now. The door to the ingredient storage room suddenly opened, and a slightly overweight young man walked in. When he saw Tang Yi in a daze, he became even more infuriated. What are you doing? What are you doing? Tang Yi was slightly stunned, and then a memory flooded into his mind. In my memory, he was a kitchen assistant at the Qingfeng building of a Chinese cuisine restaurant, who was the person who helped real chefs cut and prepare dishes, and occasionally cleaned up. Tang Yi understood and looked up at the young man in front of him. The other party has a typical Asian face, dressed in chef's clothing, with a snow-white upper body and a pitch-black lower body, wearing a chef's hat on their head, and wearing standard kitchen attire. At the same time as seeing him, Tang Yi also understood who the other party was. "Yao chef, why did you come over? Isn't the kitchen busy?" "Busy, I'm so busy. If you hadn't gone for half an hour, you would have thought I would come looking for you." The chef surnamed Yao made a sarcastic remark. As he spoke, he didn't bother with Tang Yi either. Instead, he walked to the refrigerator and took out 2 crucian carp from inside. Tang Yi quickly asked, "Yao chef, didn't you ask me to bring the pork belly? Why did you suddenly have to make fish dishes? Let's talk about my business later. Come and help me with the ginger and scallions over there, as well as the specially made refrigerated tofu. Let's get them together." Yao chef seemed quite anxious and raised his chin at Sui Yang, gesturing for him to take action quickly. Seeing this, Tang Yi had no choice but to help himself. The two quickly walked out of the storage room and headed towards the kitchen. Tang Yi also took this opportunity to quickly inquire, and he instinctively felt that something seemed to have happened in the kitchen. "Big trouble, it's the biggest crisis in the history of our Qingfeng building." As soon as he spoke, Yao chef's expression became conflicted. "The people from the resort have come to inspect and verify the qualifications of our Qingfeng building. If the review fails, our Qingfeng building will have to move out of this resort. Patrol." Tang Yi paused for a moment. "That's right, you've only been here for less than 2 months and don't know the situation yet. Let me tell you, our Qingfeng building, including all the restaurants nearby, belongs to the Far Moon Resort. Every few months, the resort will come for inspection and qualification review. If we don't do dishes that satisfy the reviewers, we will be kicked out." Now Tang Yi understood, but Far Moon Resort is always so familiar. Speaking of which, before the Great Gourmet System teleported him over, it seemed like the destination was the spirit of the halberd. Is this the world of anime? The last review was 4 months ago, and you don't know the situation at that time. Almost the Qingfeng Tower no longer exists. And this time it's really the end of the game. No one expected that the reviewer this time would be that man. That man. That's him, the overall manager of Far Moon Resort, who was once the top 10 Far Moon heroes, the Tangdao Silver. Yao chef said with a mournful tone, as if he had already determined that Qingfeng Tower would be ruined. Tang Yi was also surprised. Of course, Tangdao Yi knew that top-notch chefs have terrifying culinary skills. It may be difficult to make dishes that satisfy such people. So, this time, Chef Wang personally prepared the extremely difficult Yuanyue 1000 silk noodles, which is already a gamble. Tang Yi, let me tell you, if Qingfenglu is kicked out of the house due to Tang Daoyin's evaluation, it may be difficult for us to survive in the Japanese culinary industry, and we will only be able to make it to the heavenly court. Tang Yi felt a sense of sorrow upon hearing this, but did not expect the situation to be so serious. However, in reality, it doesn't matter where he trains his cooking skills. No matter what, he has to climb to the top of the culinary ladder. The two of them had a brief conversation and had already returned to the kitchen. Just as I entered the door, I heard a scream. Oh no! Chef Wang cut it. Someone said something, and the sound spread throughout the kitchen. Yao chef's body trembled and his face immediately turned deathly gray. It's over, it's over. How could I cut it into my hand? How could I make 1,000 silk noodles like this? Tang Yi also looked strangely and saw a man in his 40s at the head chef's position, holding his left index finger and gritting his teeth to endure the pain. That's Chef Wang. Curious, Tang Yi walked over and suddenly heard a few people whispering in his ear. Intentionally, anyway his culinary skills have declined, it's impossible for him to make 1,000 silk noodles. That's right, although it's a bit difficult for him to come at this time, there's no need to cut his finger. This discussion is very quiet, but a bit harsh. Tang Yi shook his head, ignored it, and walked all the way to Chef Wang, looking at him with concern. The finger is definitely injured, with continuous blood flow. Someone is helping him bandage it, and it seems that it has been cut to the bone. This kind of injury is really beyond our ability to cook, and even if we insist on it, it is impossible to make a perfect dish. Tang Yi sighed and didn't expect to encounter such a thing when he first came to this world. I've never heard of this dish, but unfortunately, I've never heard of it. Thinking to himself, Tang Yi suddenly saw a recipe book next to the cooking table. The menu was open, and Tang Yi looked up. The 1,000 silk noodles of crayfish. The process of making this dish is recorded above, and Tang Yi only looked at it once and roughly understood it. The problem is soup. Thinking this way, Tang Yi realized that there was already a prepared soup placed next to the recipe. With a hint of curiosity, he picked up a spoon and gently scooped up a spoonful to taste. As the soup entered, in an instant, Tang Yi felt his taste buds explode. At this moment, the tongue of God perfectly fulfills its mission. Fish, ginger, heat, thyme, oil, ginger, everything is clear to the heart. As if this soup was cooked by him himself, he even tasted the mistakes and imperfections in it. God's tongue. Good, so powerful. Tang Yi murmured in shock. At this moment, the person who helped Chef Wang bandage happened to see Tang Yi's movements, and his face immediately changed. He sternly scolded, "What are you doing? This is a dish that Chef Wang has finally prepared, and will be tasted by the reviewer later." 003 Amazing Knife Craftsmanship. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Junyang. 110, welcome book friends to join groups, chat and fart. Suddenly, someone roared loudly beside him, which really scared Tang Yi. Seeing that he didn't understand his mistake at all, the person's face turned red with anger. Tang Yi, this bowl of soup is related to the fate of all of us in the Qingfeng building. You. How dare you ruin it? How despicable. This person is also recognized by Tang Yi as the lobby manager of Qingfeng Tower, a Japanese person named Sanjo Qintao. From top to bottom, he is the third most important person under the boss and general manager. Forget it, Manager Sanjo, don't blame him anymore, that's also a failure. Chef Wang, who had bandaged the wound, waved his hand wearily and said, even if he didn't drink, my current state cannot complete 1,000 silk noodles. It can only be said that this is the fate of our Qingfeng Tower. Upon hearing this, Sanjo Qint suddenly became anxious. If he was really kicked out, he would bear this stain and find it difficult to find a job in the future. Chef Wang, it's just a cut on his finger. You see, the soup has already been completed. The rest can be handed over to other chefs for help, right? Without waiting for Chef Wang to answer, Chef Yao, who was carrying the ingredients, shook his head dejectedly and said, no way, there are two difficulties in making 1,000 silk noodles with crayfish. One is soup, and the other is 1,000 silk noodles. You need to cut a piece of tofu into noodles that look like a strand of hair. No one can do this except Chef Wang. Bean, tofu. Isn't it noodles? Santiao Qint was stunned. Although he is not a chef, he is actually the person who manages the daily affairs of Qingfeng building. Just thinking about the difficulty of cutting a piece of tofu into thousands of shreds makes it impossible. What kind of knife work is needed for this? The kitchen suddenly quieted down, and everyone's faces were filled with disappointment. It can be foreseen that if we cannot produce dishes that satisfy the reviewers, waiting for their fate will not be a good one. But at that moment, a voice broke the silence. Can I give it a try? You. At first, everyone was shocked. After seeing the spokesperson clearly, they sighed again, and Sanjo Qint said unhappily, what can you do as a kitchen assistant? Forget it, I was wrong just now, so you don't have to cause trouble for me. Upon hearing this, Tang Yi was quite surprised, as the Japanese didn't look bad either. Manager Sanjo, I really can give it a try. Upon seeing Tang Yi's request again, Sanjo Chinta couldn't help but frown and say, "What would you do with that?" Yuanyue 1000 silk noodle. Can. Tang Yi nodded subconsciously and then added, "Probably." "What does it mean? Are you really happy playing with me?" Sanjo Chint said angrily. At this moment, Chef Wang frowned and said, "Tang Yi, I know you are enthusiastic, but the 1000 silk noodles of the gobblefish are a unique dish of our family. How could you do that? I just looked at your recipe." Tang Yi shrugged, feeling a bit embarrassed. After all, it's a serious matter among chefs to sneak a peek at someone else's recipe. "Did you see it?" "Hey, I thought you could have done it." "Do you mean, just by looking at it once, you think you can do it?" Chef Wang was quite disappointed. He did have such a slight expectation before. After all, for him, Qingfeng Tower is the place where he has been working for more than 10 years. "I think so." Tang Yi recalled the recipe and said simply. "On the whole, it's not very difficult. First, fry the corydalus raw, then add the soup. Here we pay attention to the overall taste of this dish, so the soup must be prepared here. Then we slice the tofu, then shred it, soak it in warm water, and finally put it into the soup. Then we finish the fish noodles. That's so simple." This is the voice of everyone in the kitchen, but anyone with some culinary skills knows that it's easy to say, but it's quite difficult to do. If the dishes are graded, then this dish is at least A. level in difficulty. Upon hearing Tang Yi's words, as the producer of this dish, Chef Wang shook his head helplessly and said, "Tang Yi, do you know the two major difficulties of this dish?" "Difficulty? Did you mention soup and shredding?" "That's right. Soup places great emphasis on the process, and the same program can be completed by different people, resulting in vastly different flavors." Chef Wang said earnestly that when he saw Tang Yi, he had a certain attitude towards younger generations. After all, there was no other person besides Tang Yi who could stand up and say, "I'll give it a try," at such times. "Don't worry, I have tasted the soup you made and I can make it of the same level," Tang Yi nodded and said. In fact, he went down the line because God's tongue tasted flaws and imperfections, so he could improve his cooking. Of course, improvement comes with risks. Chef Wang smiled at the sound, feeling a bit amused. After a moment of thought, he turned to saying, "What about shredded tofu?" Shredded tofu. This tests a chef's basic skills. Without more than a decade of exercise, it is difficult to achieve shredded tofu. "Don't worry, I first picked up a kitchen knife when I was 3 years old. I'm 16 years old this year. My father also asked me to exercise with shredded tofu." Tang Yi earnestly stated that in fact, there is a level of 10,000 silk after the 1000 silk, which is a legend that even Tang Yi's father cannot achieve. And upon hearing his words, everyone in the kitchen was a bit surprised. Chef Wang gave Tang Yi a few deep glances before gritting his teeth and saying, "Manager Sanjo, please let him try. If he fails, I will bear all the consequences." Chef Wang. Santiao Chin's face changed and he finally nodded helplessly, saying, "Tang Yi, it's up to you. Your success or failure will determine everyone's fate." "Yes, I will do my best." Tang Yi shrugged his shoulders. Although he said so much just now, in reality, he just wanted to try the newly learned Chiyu Qianxi noodles. "I feel like I can do it well, but I don't have absolute certainty about the actual situation." Nodding, Tang Yi walked towards the position of the head chef. "Yao chef, bring over the new specially made frozen tofu. I'll shred it first, this one's a bit simpler." "Keep it simple." Yao chef was furious, and the most difficult thing was whether it was good to cut it into shreds. Of course, he said this from the bottom of his heart, and upon hearing this, he also handed over the things in his hand. Tang Yi took the tofu and took out the kitchen king's blade from his inner pocket. Taking a deep breath, he began to take action. First, open the packaged lactone tofu, then turn it around and cut off a corner. Next, gently tap the bottom of the box with the blade, and finally slowly lift the box by pinching it. In this way, the tofu poured onto the chopping board intact and undamaged. After finishing these, Tang Yi officially started cutting. Cut a piece of tofu into thousands of shreds, with each shred being evenly thin and not scattering. This is a basic requirement. I saw Tang Yi holding the kitchen king's knife, hanging his wrist and cutting it. With one swift and decisive cut, one after another, thin slices were quickly born. So proficient, so skillful, so skilled. Chef Wang's eyes lit up and he said 3 good words in a row. Not to mention him, even the outsider Sanjo Chint was stunned by Tang Yi's actions. That already has a bit of artistic beauty, even for lay people, it gives off a strong and magical feeling. Sanjo Chint suddenly took a step forward, bowed and apologized, with an extremely sincere tone. Tang Yi, I'm really sorry. It was my fault just now. Please make sure to save Qingfeng Tower. Afterwards, I want to promote you to head chef with an annual salary of millions. Everything he said was not within Tang Yi's attention, and even automatically filtered out. His mind was completely immersed in slicing. What a sharp knife, what a light knife, this knife. It's countless times better than any I've ever used. 004 Tangdao Silver. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The Kitchen King's blade slices specially made frozen tofu, and every time it falls, it gently touches the cutting board, making a pleasant sound. Sanjo Chint does not have outstanding culinary skills, but at this moment, watching Tang Yi cut tofu, there is a feeling of sitting in an opera house enjoying the melodious feeling of a musical. This person is actually cooking, but it seems like they are composing music. Tang Yi was focused, holding the Kitchen King's blade and hanging his wrist high, accurately cutting down each piece of tofu, with even thickness. Slicing is complete, next is shredding. Suddenly, Tang Yi muttered to himself in a low voice, and with a flick of the blade, he slowly sliced into thin pieces and then plunged into a high and slender position. The rhythm suddenly changes, as if the music has entered a high tide. The onlookers around only realized it at this moment, peering at each other face to face, all secretly shocked. This knife craftsmanship is a bit more skilled than the most skilled chef here, Wang. This little helper was surprisingly hidden and never revealed until such a time, which was truly shocking. However, upon seeing this knife craftsmanship, everyone had a strong expectation for Tang Yi's 1,000 silk noodles with fish, hoping to bring them surprises and save the crisis of Qingfeng Tower. My goodness, the magical celestial being, the mysterious Tang Yi, how did you do it? When the shredding was completed, the 3 Chint As who witnessed the entire process opened their mouths in shock, their faces full of disbelief. A large piece of specially made tofu on the chopping board is now gone, replaced by a neat arrangement, one by one slightly thicker than hair, with thousands of tofu shreds. It's unbelievable that this is food made with just a kitchen knife. Ha! Much easier than before. Tang Yi wiped the sweat off his forehead and smiled to himself. As soon as the people around heard this, they were speechless and choked. How could it be so easy? They just look at it, their hearts are about to reach their throats, and they are always afraid of a one-size-fits-all mistake, which could lead to disaster for all the tofu shreds and ruin their beauty. However, in fact, Tang Yi did feel more relaxed than before. He was well aware that the reason was not the sudden increase in his knife skills, but the changes brought about by S.grade kitchen utensils. This Kitchen King's blade is truly beyond expectations. Not to mention its sharpness, just because it doesn't stick when cutting tofu is enough to stand out among the crowd. Carefully placing these tofu shreds into a large bowl filled with warm water, Tang Yi began cooking delicious fish soup. Yao chef. What's up? Can you help cut the side dishes? I'm afraid I'll make people wait in a hurry, Tang Yi smiled slightly and said. Upon hearing this, Yao chef's face trembled with fat and he silently began to help. Just now, the other party was still his assistant chef. In this moment, the positions of both sides underwent a dramatic change, and it was his turn to take on Tang Yi. However, Chef Yao is also very excited from the bottom of his heart. He personally participated in the cooking of the difficult dish 1,000 silk noodles with dried fish, which will still be helpful for his future culinary skills. Okay, Tang Chef. First, cut the ginger, then the scallions. Despite indulging in cooking, Tang Yi couldn't hear the other person's change in address. Refined salt. Here, Tang Chef. Cut scallions. Here. Salad oil. Okay. Let's do this for now. After 50 seconds, turn the fish over. No more seconds will do. Understand? The cooking proceeded in an orderly manner, with Tang Yi directing the assistance of the chef Yao while also constantly paying attention to the preparation of the fresh soup. Fire, temperature, time, and any detail are perfectly analyzed by the tongue of God's taste. Qingfenglu belongs to Yuanyue Resort and is the only Chinese cuisine restaurant in this area. The storefront is not very large, even the smallest, with only 3 floors. The lower and middle floors are open to the public, while the upper floor is reserved for VIPs. On the 3rd floor, which is decorated with a Chinese-style atmosphere, inside the screen, there is a quaint mahogany dining table with a muscular man with a cut sitting next to it. He is Tangdao Yin, the head chef of Yuanyue Resort. Once ranked first among the 10 masters of the Far Moon. The holder of the highest score for graduates. At this moment, holding her chest in both hands, she sat back in a chair, staring blankly at the empty dining table. So slow. How long has it been? General, it has been an hour since we entered the door. Standing next to Tangdao Yin, a man in a suit lowered his head to look at the time record when he heard the question. An hour has passed, and you haven't produced a decent dish yet. It seems like I can only judge you as unqualified. Yes, I'm sorry. The kitchen said it will be ready soon. A waiter apologized repeatedly. Immediately, but the rule is 1 hour. Tangdao Yin didn't hesitate to smile, but halfway through, he suddenly stopped. He reached out and touched his nose, then looked out of the screen. Sure enough, someone was carrying a plate and walking towards this side. I've been waiting for a long time. Tang Yi bypassed the screen and saw Tangdao Yin at a glance. He smiled slightly and said, a good dish needs to go through strict cooking. Please forgive Tangdao, the chief. Tangdao Yin stared at Tang Yi with a hint of surprise in his eyes. Are you the best chef here? You're so young. No, I'm just a kitchen helper. Helping with the kitchen. Tangdao Yin was slightly taken aback, his gaze fixed on Tang Yi's palm as he handed over the plate. Didn't you make this? I made it. This dish is called. Tang Yi calmly placed the 1,000 silk noodles of yam fish on the table, just about to start introducing it. Unexpectedly, someone interrupted. The man who had been recording the review time frowned and said, Are you joking? First, it delayed the time, and now. Are you guys crazy at Qingfeng Tower? Who do you think this adult is? He's. That's enough, you'd better shut up first. Tangdao Yin waved her hand, her gaze completely drawn to the dishes on the table. Is this your dish? That's right, it's called Qian Simian or Qian Simian. It looks like it's just ordinary noodles. This little brother, you've exceeded the time limit, but I'll still taste it. If it's not satisfactory, I'll directly judge you as unqualified. Of course, being unqualified means being unqualified. I don't think anyone will have any complaints. Tang Yi smiled faintly and made a gesture of invitation. Please use it slowly, Chief Tang Island. Nodding, Tangdao Yin had a good impression of Tang Yi's senses. Immediately, he picked up his chopsticks, gently inserted them into the bowl, picked up 4 or 5 slender noodles, and put them into his mouth. As soon as this side entered, a refreshing and silky sensation erupted in the mouth, as if it were spring and silky. Tangdao Yin's eyes widened in an instant. 006 Dream Kitchen. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Yuanyue College, full name is Yuanyue Cuisine College. Chaoyao means a small tea tasting room or restaurant in a temple. This college adopts a 3-year system for both the secondary and higher education departments, and graduates from other secondary schools are equally qualified for admission. But it is very difficult to advance to graduation, with a graduation rate below 10%. In summary, it is one of the top elite culinary colleges in Japan. At the end of March, the spring break is also coming to an end. If Tang Yi wants to enroll, the decision time given is also this week. Staring at the business card in a daze, Tang Yi's ear once again heard 3 voices of Chint Tai. Tang Yi, you did a great job. It was you who saved our Qingfeng building. According to the previous agreement in the kitchen, I will propose to the general manager to appoint you as one of the main chefs of Qingfeng building, with an annual salary of millions. The status of the head chef and the assistant chef can be said to be vastly different. Apart from that, just income is one place at a time. Tang Yi's current monthly salary is 200,000 yen, with an annual salary of around 2.5 million yen, which has suddenly increased to 4 times. Although there was a lot of money, Tang Yi was still stunned for a while and said, "Is there anything like this?" Upon hearing his words, Sanjo Chint thought he was not satisfied and quickly persuaded him, "Tang Yi, no, Chef Tang, I know your cooking skills are not just a small amount of money, but please understand that qualifications in Japan are also an important indicator. I promise that as long as you nod, you can still get a 10% increase the next year. After that, you will increase by this amount every year. Up to 10 years. This is quite a temptation. As long as he works here for 10 years, Tang Yi will transform into a wealthy person, and at that time, he was only 26 years old. However, Tang Yi shook his head and said, "Manager Santiao, that's not what I meant. I am very grateful for your invitation, but I have already decided that I want to go to Yuanyue College." Go to the college. Everyone was shocked. Yes, just now Tangdao Yin gave me a business card, which means that. Su Yi shrugged and said, "In fact, manager, my cooking skills are not as superb as you imagine. It's just that this time's cooking happens to be what I'm good at. So, in order to improve my cooking skills, I have to go to Yuanyue College. I'm really sorry." "Yeah, that's right, Tang Yi. You're still young, so you should go out and see more when you're young." Sanjo Chint was quite regretful, but with a forced smile, "Since you've made a decision, I can't stop you. But Qingfeng Tower welcomes you back at any time. Alright, Yao Chef, I'll give you a break tomorrow. You can drive Tang Yi to the college. It's almost April now, so it's better to go early." "No problem. Tang Yi, you need to work hard in the academy. Don't embarrass the chefs of the Heavenly Dynasty." Yao Chef's chubby face was filled with seriousness, and he raised his fist and gave Tang Yi a hard blow. Tang Yi smiled and said, "Of course." Chinese cuisine, one of the 8 major cuisines in China, boasts thousands of delicious dishes that are unparalleled in the world. Although he doesn't know many, he still has a few specialties. No matter what, he won't embarrass Chinese cuisine. "I'm tired today, I want to go back and rest first." After a pause, Tang Yi looked at Sanjo Jingtai again. "Go ahead, Tang Yi, take a good rest and report to the college tomorrow," said Sanjo Jingtai generously. Nodding, Tang Yi packed his things and left Qingfeng Tower. As a staff member of Far Moon Resort, there is a dedicated dormitory building provided, but of course, rent is still required, and the price varies depending on the level. In Tang Yi's situation, he can only rent the cheapest one, with a monthly rent of 150,000 yuan. Of course, the living conditions are very good, and if it is placed outside, the monthly rent will be at least 300,000 yuan. Thanks to this, the vast majority of his monthly income is handed over to the landlord. Take the bus back to the dormitory building, a building that is 16 stories high. Tang Yi's room is on the 11th floor. After taking the elevator upstairs, Tang Yi finally arrived at his doorstep, only to see a rolled-up paper stuck on the doorknob. What is it? Tang Yi took it off and opened it, his face suddenly turned black. This is a message, roughly meaning that it's time to pay rent. Damn it, where did I get the money? The salary from Qingfeng building hasn't been paid yet. It's better to go to Yuanyue Academy as soon as possible. At least as long as there's cooking skills there, anything can be discussed easily. That college adheres to the law of the jungle, where people with exceptional culinary skills can do whatever they want and everything they want will be satisfied. Tomorrow, I'll go tomorrow. Tang Yi tightly squeezed the paper into a ball and threw it into the trash can before opening the door and walking in. After being tired all day, Tang Yi was too lazy to cook dinner. He took off his backpack and lay down on the bed. In no time, Tang Yi fell asleep. In his sleep, Tang Yi woke up to find himself in a kitchen. Exquisite kitchenware, sparkling, and a wide range of ingredients to choose from. Tang Yi was surprised and opened the refrigerator, which was filled with various high-end meats and fresh milk. Host, welcome to the Dream Kitchen. I am the great foodie E. Suddenly, a sweet voice of a little girl came from behind. Tang Yi suddenly turned around and saw the fairy. Dream Kitchen. Yes, host. This is a place specifically designed for you to exercise your cooking skills for free. It's your first time coming in, and I have specially given you 100 delicious food points. Delicious food. Tang Yi hesitated for a moment. Gourmet points are very useful. You can exchange kitchen utensils, cooking techniques, ingredients, recipes, and so on. Everything related to food can be exchanged through food points. Ipu flapped her small wings and flew in mid-air, then sat down at a dining table. Hurry up, E is already starving and growling. The host should quickly make something delicious for E. I didn't eat it myself. Tang Yi muttered inwardly. The little fairy immediately pouted and said cunningly, Host, don't you want some delicious food? As long as you make delicious food for E, E will give you some delicious food as a gift based on the evaluation. This made Tang Yi a little moved. Today I want to eat Italian lasagna, the host is making it for me. Ha! I don't know. Tang Yi rolled his eyes, how about I make Sichuan cuisine for you? No, I'm going to have Italian lasagna today. By the way, I'll exchange the recipe for the host. The little fairy raised her hand a little, and suddenly, a shiny silver recipe appeared out of thin air and flew into Tang Yi's hands. This is exchanged for 100 delicious food points from the art host. The host quickly makes me lasagna. Hey, don't just use my delicious food. Tang Yi's head suddenly swelled. 007 Yuanyue College. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the future, if you use any of my delicacies, be careful not to let me kill you. The Kitchen King's blade pressed against the fair neck of the little fairy, and Tang Yi threatened with a gloomy tone. Yes. Yi's face turned green with fear, and a pair of small wings shrank into a ball, nodding repeatedly at Tang Yi. Well, that's pretty much the same. Tang Yi finally let her go and rolled up his sleeves, picked up the recipe and started reading it. Italian lasagna is a recipe from the culinary kingdom of Italy, belonging to Italian-wide noodles. The main seasonings used are tomatoes or tomato sauce. The recipe details the cooking steps, so as long as you follow the step by step, it's not a problem to make it. I said, I'll make it for you to eat. How many delicious dishes would you give me? Tang Yi asked as he looked at Yin Shanshan's recipe. Host, this depends on your culinary skills. The minimum is 0 and the maximum is 100. The little fairy calmed down a bit and knelt on the chair, answering seriously. Is it from 0 to 100? It's a bit of an exam. Well, it doesn't matter, I'll give it a try. Speaking, Tang Yi put down the recipe and began searching for the ingredients he needed in the kitchen. At this moment, Yi spoke cautiously and said, "Host, I have to explain a few things about the dream kitchen to you." "Ah." You said. Firstly, the dream kitchen is provided for free, with the same time flow as the outside world. That is to say, if you stay here for 8 hours, the outside world will also pass for 8 hours. Therefore, please make sure to come here every night when you sleep. I see, I understand. Secondly, Dream Kitchen provides paid services. If you need to speed up the time flow, you will need to pay a certain amount of food points based on the time in the kitchen. For example, if you need a 1.2 time flow, you will need to pay 1 food point for every hour you stay in the kitchen. If it is a 1.3 time flow, you will need to pay 2 food points per hour. What's the use of this? Tang Yi just selected 2 tomatoes and couldn't help but glance at Yi. Upon hearing this, Yi smiled triumphantly and said, "It works. You must need this feature sometimes. For example, when you want to conquer a newly learned dish. What else is there behind?" Tang Yi remained noncommittal. Thirdly, you are in a dream kitchen, and the external body will be in a shallow sleep state. If someone wakes you up, you will be forced to leave the dream kitchen. Good. Fourthly, you can bring all the ingredients in the dream kitchen to reality, but you need some delicious food. As expected, I knew it. Is there anything else? Tang Yi rolled his eyes. That's all for now, host. Hurry up and make lasagna. Yi hesitated and said eagerly, "Yi can't wait to taste it." Understood, please wait a moment. Tang Yi smiled faintly and put 2 tomatoes into hot water, preparing to peel them. The next morning, Tang Yi packed his things, got into Yao Chef's car, and headed to Yuanyue Academy. What's wrong? You're not feeling well. Yao Che started the car and glanced at Tang Yi in the passenger seat, only to see him squinting his eyes and taking a nap. No, I just made Italian lasagna many times and felt a bit dizzy. Don't worry, you can drive. Tang Yi waved his hand. Seeing that he didn't want to say much, Yao Chef could only shrug and drive the car seriously. It took a full hour of driving from Far Moon Resort to Far Moon Academy before finally arriving. After an hour of rest, Tang Yi also fully recovered his spirit. After getting off the car, Tang Yi finally saw Yuanyue College Cuisine School, a magnificent building with many vehicles entering and exiting the entrance. They are all students from other schools who came to take the exam, right? Tang Yi, if you have the recommendation of General Manager Tangdao, you can directly report to the registration office. Sitting in the car, Yao Chef smiled and said, "Come on. Well, thank you for taking me here. So, goodbye." Tang Yi smiled and waved his hand, then picked up his backpack and walked into this super elite culinary college. As he walked inside, he realized that there were indeed quite a few people, each dressed appropriately and carrying guards and butlers. At first glance, they were wealthy people. In comparison, his ordinary casual clothes were completely out of place. Without time to wander, Tang Yi directly found the location of the registration office on the large map at the entrance. Upon determining the destination, Tang Yi immediately took action. Shortly thereafter, he arrived at the admissions office on the first floor of the General Affairs building. In the office, there sat a female teacher in her 20s, lazily lying on the table, as if hearing a knock on the door. She lazily looked up and put on a pair of red-framed glasses. Transfer student. Go to the transfer student exam venue. You came to the wrong place, little brother. Tang Yi's corner of the eye twitched, and the woman seemed to have not noticed that she had left. Teacher, I was recommended by the head of Tangdao Silver restaurant, he said, the total length of Tangdao. Upon hearing this name, the woman immediately perked up and carefully looked at Tang Yi before suddenly saying, there was indeed a recommendation letter sent over last night. It turned out to be you. I'm really sorry, you can sit down first. She stood up to tidy up her clothes before inviting Tang Yi to come in and sit down. This office is quite large. Tang Yi was invited to sit on the sofa, and the female teacher poured him a cup of barley tea. Please use. Thank you. The recommendation letter was submitted last night, but the response has not been conveyed yet. I will go and ask for your help now. Can you sit here for a while? Okay, thank you. Suddenly becoming polite, Tang Yi couldn't help but sigh that the name Tangdao Yin was really useful. Soon, the female teacher left the office. Tang Yi drank barley tea alone, flipped through food magazines, and passed the boring time. On the corridor of the second floor of the General Affairs building, two girls are quickly passing by, preparing to go downstairs. Lord Erina, you are going to review the transfer exam next. Let's put it aside, Fei Sha. You should be very clear, right? What I hate the most are those guys who want to take the back door. Are you referring to the student recommended by the head chef of Tangdao? However, since it is recommended by the head chef of Tangdao, it should be possible. Fei Sha, I have entered the evaluation committee now. Since I know about this kind of matter, I have an obligation to personally review it. The blonde girl spoke confidently, and finally, they arrived at the door of the registration office. Taking a deep breath, the girl suddenly pushed the door in and said, a guy with mediocre cooking skills who only knows how to use the back door, Yuanyue doesn't need it. Is that you? Ha! Demai Cha was lifted in mid-air, and Tang Yi looked at the imposing blonde girl with confusion. This girl looks familiar, what's her name? Shaving and Painting Rina. 008 Shaving and Painting Rina. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. The barley tea emitted a faint aroma, and Tang Yi half raised his teacup, his gaze tilted towards the office door. Two girls wearing Far Moon school uniforms stood there, one of whom had orange hair, a delicate face, and a proud expression like a golden peacock. Her previous words were from her mouth. Another person with purple hair, petite/small in stature, slightly shorter, holding a blue writing board on her chest, stood there without saying a word. Both sides just stared at each other, and the atmosphere in the office was strange. Ha! Tang Yi sighed with confusion. Is that you? It seems that in order to salvage the increasingly delicate atmosphere, Shazai Painted Lina Shumei furrowed her brows and had to increase her voice, repeating it again. Tang Yi took a few more glances before finally retracting his gaze. He slowly stood up and filled his barley tea with hot water. After finishing these things, he blew hot air and looked at the shaved and painted Rina. Knowing the reason, he asked, who are you? No problem, I'll get started. Wait, I designated tomatoes as the ingredient, and you must use them to make a dish. Shaving and Painting Rina also added conditions. Tang Yi followed her gaze to the table where the ingredients were stored, and indeed saw a basket of bright red tomatoes. Immediately, he smiled and said, what a coincidence. I just learned a dish. It's all there is. 009 God's Tongue Kiss. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Italian lasagna. That's all Tang Yi needs to do. This dish happens to require tomatoes, although the recipe may seem a bit complicated, it's better than him practicing in the dream kitchen for 10 hours last night. It takes about an hour for normal production, which is not enough time. It seems that we have to operate multiple lines simultaneously. Taking a deep breath, Tang Yi walked to the ingredient storage table, took all the necessary ingredients to the kitchen counter, and then washed his hands with a faucet. It is necessary etiquette for chefs to keep their hands clean when cooking. Tang Yi cleaned slowly, not letting go of any possible dirt. He also cleaned back and forth 3 times between his fingers, palms, wrists, and other areas that were prone to accumulation of dirt. All of a sudden, 3 minutes were wasted. After washing his hands, he officially started. To ensure completion within half an hour, multi-line operation is necessary. I saw him take 3 pots first, 1 deep pot, 1 flat-bottomed pot, and 1 iron pot. Put an appropriate amount of butter into a flat pan, pour a certain amount of olive oil into a deep pan, and pour regular cooking oil into an iron pan. While setting the heat for the 3 pots, Tang Yi filled a small pot of cold water in a boiling pot and brought it to a boil over high heat. After finishing these, Tang Yi reached into his inner pocket and took out the chef king's blade that he carried with him. Quickly walking to the chopping board, Tang Yi peeled off the washed carrots. Chef Wang Zhibian only turned around the carrot in his left hand, and a layer of carrot skin was precisely removed, just like a shy girl taking off her clothes, which was heart-stopping. The 2 young girls who were watching not far away were both energized when they saw this scene. Regardless of the culinary skills, this knife work is truly stunning. But what's even more stunning is still ahead. The peeled carrots were chopped, the onions were shredded, and the celery was chopped. Under the control of Tang Yi, the kitchen king's blade quickly flashed, and all the movements were skilled enough to create a sense of beauty. There was no hesitation in dragging mud or water, and the vegetables cut seemed to be carefully calculated and quite neat. This guy. Shaving and painting Rina has put aside her contempt, biting her thumb and staring intently at Tang Yi's cooking. I have to admit, this guy's surface skills are very impressive. Cooking is like performing acrobatics, and he has a considerable level of appreciation. Fei Sha, standing beside her, also showed surprise, covering her small mouth and paying attention silently. However, Tang Yi seemed to have forgotten everything and his mind was completely immersed in the cooking. Thanks to this skilled craftsman, everything went smoothly and quickly. Chopped carrots, celery, and onions are poured into an iron pot and stir-fried. While flipping with his right hand, Tang Yi's left hand was also not idle. The olive oil in the flat pan was already simmering over low heat. At this point, Tang Yi's left hand took out the minced beef and added it to the stir-fry. MOU lasted for 5 minutes, and the vegetables in the iron pot had already been stir-fried until fragrant. Tang Yi immediately extinguished the heat of the iron pot and quickly poured the vegetables into the flat-bottomed pot, continuing to stir-fry. While stir-frying, free your hand and pour an appropriate amount of cold water, red wine, and tomato sauce into the pot. After stir-frying again, Tang Yi covered the pot and reduced the heat to low. At this point, the butter in the deep pot had been completely heated to melt. Tang Yi immediately took flour and milk and poured them in, stirring and boiling. After a moment, the butter, milk, and flour were completely mixed together, forming a paste. At this point, Tang Yi breathed a slight sigh of relief, covered the pot lid, and turned towards the boiling pot. After about 10 minutes of cooking, the water in the pot had completely boiled. Tang Yi picked up a salt spoon and poured a spoonful into the boiling water. Then, he added the dough and boiled it until it was 80% cooked. Okay, so amazing. Fei Sha, who was quietly watching from a distance, murmured in surprise, "It's amazing to have multiple lines of operation at the same time, and there's no chaos, it's not an ordinary student level." Speaking of which, Fei Sha couldn't help but glance at Shikui Rina. I saw Shizeo painted Lina biting his thumb, his eyes fixed on Tang Yi, or more precisely, his hands. Those hands haven't stopped for a moment since they started cooking. 1,000 noodles, depending on the situation, it's Italian cuisine. In order to complete it in half an hour, this guy forcefully reduced the 1-hour-long process. And the method of reduction is to rely on his multi-line operation. Seeing this, she has already gained an intuitive understanding of Tang Yi's cooking skills. At least in terms of knife skills, they are not at the student level. That skilled knife skills are also the foundation for making multi-line operations possible. Time passed by minute by second, and without realizing it, 20 minutes had already passed. At this moment, Tang Yi pushed the baking tray containing thousands of noodles into the oven. Heat up. 250 degrees Celsius lower heat. 220 degrees Celsius time. 10 minutes with the timed sound, Tang Yi breathed a complete sigh of relief. Ha! It's really exhausting. Raising his hand to wipe off the sweat stains on his forehead, Tang Yi smiled slightly and looked at shaving and painting Rina. Please wait for 10 minutes, it will be ready soon. Upon hearing what he said, shaving and painting Rina suddenly walked over, staring at Tang Yi with displeased eyes and saying, "What do you mean?" "Ha! What you made is Italian lasagna, which is not very difficult, but rather complex. In order to save time, you cut corners and even shortened the baking time from 20 minutes to 10 minutes. You want me to?" At this point, Erina's face was filled with anger. "Do you want my divine tongue to taste your second-rate cuisine?" Upon hearing this, Tang Yi's smile also slightly faded. "I admit that I only learned this dish yesterday, but I didn't cut corners, I improved the recipe. As for why it's only 10 minutes, you'll know when you taste it later. I only learned it yesterday." Rina was completely angry and snorted, "Fei Sha, let's go. There's nothing to say about this commoner." "Lord Erina." Xin Hu Fei Sha looked at Tang Yi and quickly followed suit. "Wait," Tang Yi rubbed his eyebrows, but saw that the other person didn't stop at all. He had to shake his head and say, "Ah, God's tongue, God's tongue. I'm so annoyed. Let me tell you directly, I also have God's tongue." "What?" As soon as these words were spoken, the two girls who were leaving stopped together and turned around to look over in astonishment. "What are you saying?" "Ha! I said I also have a divine tongue." "Are you joking, just a commoner?" Shaving and painting Rina gritted her teeth, her beautiful big eyes glaring at Tang Yi. "Do you want to insult me?" Tang Yi wiped his hands with a towel before slowly walking up to shaving and painting Rina and playfully saying, "Don't you believe it? How could a second-rate chef like you understand the greatness of God's tongue, like a wild dog and not appreciating gemstones?" Seemingly touched upon with dignity, Rina never gave up in his shaving and painting. "You have a really awkward temper. All right, in order to make the noble Miss Erina believe me, I will reluctantly prove it." Tang Yi showed helplessness and as he spoke, he reached out and pinched the pointed chin of the shaved painted Rina, lifting it slightly. "What do you want to do?" The haughty girl, like a peacock, was startled and stuttered a bit. However, the next moment. The wild dog actually kissed the gem. Shaving and drawing Rina completely confused, her brain blank. 010 angry and crying Erina. You are listening at novelfull.audio. With so many people urging me, then I'll add another chapter. Remember to give some flowers. The new book PK list is so far from being able to make it to the shaving and drawing Rina was confused, and her brain was blank. I can't believe I was forcibly kissed by a commoner. Where is the examiner? We have an exam, who will review it for us? Hurry up. The noise was so loud that Tang Yi frowned as he spoke one by one. Quiet. I couldn't help but shout loudly, and suddenly, the whole room fell silent, as if scared by him. Look at you guys, do you look like a chef? Keep quiet, don't you know? You chatter incessantly and leave saliva on the ingredients, fools. His harsh lesson made many students shrink their heads. Yes, sorry, where is the examiner? It's already time, Upon hearing this, Tang Yi snorted and said angrily, I am the examiner. Your performance is too poor, all of you are unqualified. Where are you going from? 011 Magical Misunderstanding. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Tang Yi directly judged everyone as unqualified and told them to get lost. It's like a stone thrown into a calm water surface, and all the candidates present are clamoring for an explanation. What a joke. It's unreasonable to judge us as unqualified before the exam starts. That's right. That's right. And who are you, the examiner? Even if you are an examiner, we will not comply with such unreasonable review results. A large group of people arguing, at least in terms of momentum, can definitely win. Tang Yi glanced at the group of candidates, who were all around 15 or 6 years old, young and energetic. Judging by their attire, they were all born from wealthy families and had temperaments. It's really troublesome. Tang Yi whispered to himself, took off his thick cotton gloves, and quietly waited for them to finish arguing, holding his chest in both hands. After about 4 or 5 minutes, the argument and questioning finally weakened, and the candidates who noticed the change in atmosphere quickly became obedient and learned to shut up. Have you finished speaking? Tang Yi leaned against the cooking table behind him and spoke naturally. It's really annoying to make such a noise. Do you suspect that I'm not an examiner? Okay, here's a dish I just made. You think you have excellent cooking skills and can be a qualified person to stand up and eat. The candidates looked at each other, but no one immediately stepped forward. Looking at Tang Yi's demeanor, these candidates have already believed it 7 or 8 times. But there was still someone whispering. This examiner is so young, he's about the same age as us. Who was speaking just now? Tang Yi suddenly spoke, his gaze turning and quickly locking onto the person who had spoken before. That is a boy with short golden hair, aged 15 or 16, wearing a famous brand all over his body, and his wealth is not insignificant. Being named by Tang Yi, the boy was startled and instinctively wanted to escape, but found that Tang Yi had already looked at him. Yes, I'm sorry, examiner. I didn't mean to. What's your name? Kanda Dakong. Kanda, what do you do at home? Speaking of this, Kanda Dakong seemed to have confidence, his voice slightly louder, and he said, my family runs a hot spring hotel, and there are chains all over the country, such as the one in Tokyo, which is very popular. Okay, come here, come eat and see. Tang Yi interrupted, pointing to the other person and then to the Italian lasagna on the baking tray. Upon hearing these words, Kanda Dakong was immediately aroused and looked left and right before walking towards Tang Yi with a stiff face. At first, he was still very nervous, but as he got closer, he immediately smelled a refreshing and rich aroma. This fragrance entered the nose, and Kanda Dakong immediately felt the secretion of stomach acid, and a feeling of hunger emanated from his stomach. His Adam's apple wriggled a bit, and Kanda Takashi quickly picked up his knife, cut a small piece of lasagna, and then picked it up with a fork. When the rich aroma of the lasagna entered the mouth, Kanda Dakong only chewed once and immediately entered a state of unconsciousness. Immediately after, he couldn't help but start taking a second bite. Delicious. I can't say it's delicious, the more I eat, the hungrier I get. He chewed while speaking vaguely. I've had breakfast already, but it seems like I can still eat another big piece now. The candidates outside the kitchen were all stunned. In just 1 minute, a large piece of lasagna, half of which had already been eaten by Kanda Dakong. Moreover, it seems that they are still preparing to continue eating. This made the rest of the exams unable to help but swallow their saliva and look at the remaining half of the noodles. Stop. Tang Yi had to intervene. I just asked you to take a bite. Who asked you to finish it? Kanda Dakong, who had reacted, immediately wiped the grease off his mouth and apologized by bowing. I'm sorry, examiner. Your cooking was so delicious that I didn't realize it. Upon hearing this, Tang Yi sighed and said, since you admit that I am an examiner, then it's easy to say. You are all unqualified, back and forth from where? As he spoke, he waved his hand in disgust as if driving away. Suddenly, the shocked candidates became agitated again. Examiner, you can't do this. We haven't cooked yet. That is to say, at least we must be convinced by this judgment, and we will not agree with it. Listening to these noisy voices, Tang Yi's head widened. How can he be qualified even if he has a headache? It's really irresponsible for that woman to just leave the mess and run away. Shut up, everyone. Do you want to try it? Alright, I'll point out the recipe. Italian lasagna, it takes an hour. Alright, let's start. With a casual remark, Tang Yi picked up his backpack and walked to the corner to sit down on his own. Yes. The candidates who learned about the exam questions were all full of energy and began to choose ingredients. Tang Yi, who was watching from a distance, couldn't help but shake his head. These eager candidates are doing meaningless things, but they don't have the authority to pass the exam and insist on wasting time. Moreover, they are not examiners at all. How can they believe this group of people? Speaking of which, who should I find qualified to go? Tang Yi suddenly felt a headache. Yuanyue College occupies a huge area, which is several points larger than ordinary universities. At the center of the college, there is a magnificent building. On the top floor of the building, there is an office, and the owner of the office is the left guard gate of the Shaving Immortal, known as the Food Demon King, and the General of the Academy. One of the giants in the food industry who is over 60 years old. At this moment, in the office, Shaving Immortal left guard gate was scratching his head and listening to a young girl's report. Xinhufiai Sha shared everything that had happened before, including the incident of Rina being made to cry. After listening to the report, Shaving Immortal left guard gate couldn't help but feel happy. It turns out that's the case, no wonder there's no such thing as Erina. However, that kid's ability to make Erina cry is also very impressive. General. This student named Tang Yi was indeed recommended by Tangdao Yin. In the recommendation letter, he gave a very high evaluation of the cuisine, calling it top 10 standards. Shaving the Immortal left guard gate stroked his beard and smiled, now I hear you say that he still has the tongue of the gods. Interestingly, he has the same talent as Erina. How about this, Fei Sha? Xinhu Fei Sha listened quietly, but the more she heard from behind, the more panicked her face became. The general actually made that man and